A routine gas run turned cold when the police cruiser pulled up behind me. What began as a simple errand quickly spiraled into a nightmare confrontation I'd been warned about my entire life. The Tuesday evening air was thick and heavy, smelling of cut grass and the promise of a summer storm. I was 17, and I'd had my driver's license for exactly 2 months and 6 days. Every trip, even a simple run to the gas station, felt like a small adventure, a taste of the freedom that was just around the corner. I was driving my mom's car, a dark blue sedan that was reliable and boring in the way only a parent's car can be. She'd sent me out for gas and a specific brand of overpriced popcorn for our weekly movie night. It was our thing. I pulled into the well-lit circle of the Shell station on Elm and Oak, a place I'd been to 100 times. The familiar chime of the pump, the low hum of the coolers inside the convenience store, it was the soundtrack of any normal suburban evening. I swiped the card, selected the gas grade, and leaned against the car, scrolling through my phone while the tank filled. A beat-up pickup truck pulled out, leaving just me and a minivan with a baby on board sticker at the far pumps. Everything was quiet. Too quiet, I guess. That's when I saw it. The slow, predatory crawl of a police cruiser turning into the station. It didn't have its lights on, but it might as well have. It moved with a weight that sucked all the air out of the space. My stomach tightened into a familiar knot. It's the knot every black kid gets when a cop car appears out of nowhere. You haven't done anything wrong, but you suddenly feel the need to prove it. I instinctively straightened up, put my phone in my pocket, and focused on the nozzle in my hand, making myself as small and uninteresting as possible. The cruiser didn't just pass through. It coasted to a stop directly behind my mom's sedan, boxing me in. My heart started thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. Be cool, Leo. You're just getting gas. You've done nothing wrong. The driver's side door opened, and a man unfolded himself from the car. He was big, with a barrel chest that strained the buttons of his uniform and a thick, walrus-like mustache that seemed to pull his entire face into a permanent sneer. He took his time adjusting his belt, his eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Evening," he said. His voice was a gravelly rumble that seemed to scrape the inside of my ears. "Evening, officer," I replied, keeping my voice as steady as I could. I made sure my hands were visible, one still on the gas pump, the other resting on the roof of the car. The talk. My dad had given me the talk when I was 12. My mom had given it to me again the day I got my license. Hands visible, no sudden movements. Yes, sir, no, sir. Don't give them a reason. The officer, whose name tag read Miller, strolled towards me, his boots crunching softly on the pavement. "That's a nice car you're driving." It wasn't a compliment. It was an accusation. "It's my mom's, sir," I said quickly. He smirked, a slow, ugly thing. "Your mom's, huh? She know you have it out this late?" I glanced at the sky. The sun had barely set. "She sent me to get gas, sir, for our movie night." "Movie night," he repeated, drawing the words out as if they tasted bad. He walked around to the back of the car. "You know you've got a taillight out?" I froze. I knew for a fact that wasn't true. My mom was meticulous about her car. We just had it inspected last month. "I don't think so, sir. We just got it checked." "Are you calling me a liar, son?" His voice dropped, losing its mock-pleasant tone and taking on a hard, dangerous edge. "No, sir. Absolutely not, sir. I was just surprised." "License and registration." It wasn't a request. He was standing beside me now, close enough that I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. I carefully removed my hand from the pump, which had just clicked off. "They're in the glove compartment, sir. May I get them?" He nodded, his eyes never leaving my face. Every movement felt like it was in slow motion. I opened the door, leaned in slowly, and retrieved the documents from the glove box. I handed them over. He took them, his fingers brushing mine, and the contact felt like an electric shock. He opened my wallet to my driver's license, holding it up next to my face, squinting in the fluorescent lights of the gas station canopy. "Leo Washington," he read aloud. He looked from the plastic card to me and back again. "You look nervous, Leo. You got something to be nervous about." "No, sir. I'm just getting gas." He ignored me, his thumb tracing the edge of my license. "Where you headed after this? Back home to Mommy?" "Yes, sir." He leaned against the car, crossing his arms. The movement was casual, but it was a clear show of dominance. "You know, we've had a lot of reports of stolen vehicles in this area. Cars just like this one, driven by kids who look a lot like you." The anger, hot and sharp, pricked at the back of my throat, but I swallowed it down. "Don't give them a reason." This car isn't stolen, sir. That's my mom's name on the registration. You can call her. His smirk returned. Oh, I'm sure I can. But first, why don't you put your hands on the hood of the car for me? My blood ran cold. Sir? Why? You asking a lot of questions, kid. Hands on the hood. Now. My mind was screaming. This was wrong. This was a nightmare. People in the convenience store were starting to stare through the big glass windows. The guy in the minivan was watching, his face a blank mask. I slowly, deliberately, placed my hands on the cool metal of the hood. Officer Miller kicked my feet apart, wider than was necessary, making me feel unsteady. He patted me down, his hands rough and invasive, lingering a little too long over my pockets. He found my phone and a pack of gum. He tossed them on the roof of the car. Finding nothing, he seemed to get even angrier. He opened my car door and began to rifle through the contents. He ripped open the bag from the convenience store, crushing the expensive popcorn and scattering it on the passenger seat. What's this? What's this? He muttered, tossing aside old napkins and a spare hose cord. I was shaking now, a mixture of rage and terror. Sir, please, I said, my voice cracking. My mom is waiting for me. He slammed the passenger door shut and got right in my face. His breath was hot and sour. I think you're lying to me, Leo. I think this car is stolen, and I think you've got something illegal in here, and I'm going to find it. Tears of frustration were stinging my eyes. I blinked them back furiously. I had one last card to play. Call her, I choked out. Please, just call my mom. Her name is on the registration. The number is in my phone. Officer Miller stared at me for a long moment, a cruel glint in his eyes. He seemed to enjoy my desperation. He picked up my phone from the roof. Fine, he sneered. Let's call Mommy. Let's see what she has to say about her little boy being out so late with her car. He navigated to my recent calls and found Mom. He jabbed the screen with a thick finger and put the phone on speaker. It rang once. Twice. Leo, is everything okay, honey? Her voice was warm and familiar, and it almost broke me. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling, I'm at the Shell station. An officer has some questions about the car. There was a split second of silence on the other end. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and hard as diamond. Leo, is the officer with you right now? Yes, ma'am. Miller grunted into the phone, snatching it from my hand and turning off the speaker. He put it to his ear. This is Officer Miller with the County Sheriff's Department. I'm speaking with a minor who is in possession of a vehicle registered to, Dr. Alana Washington. Is that you? He listened for a moment, a smug, self-satisfied look on his face. He was expecting a flustered, worried mother. He was expecting to intimidate her, to have her beg him to let her precious boy go. But as he listened, I watched his face change. The smirk faltered. The color drained from his cheeks. His eyes widened, and his whole body went rigid, as if he'd been tasered. He stood there, frozen under the buzzing fluorescent lights of the gas station, the phone still pressed to his ear, his mouth hanging slightly open in utter disbelief. The phone in his hand seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. He slowly lowered it from his ear, his thumb fumbling with the screen to end the call. He didn't look at me. He looked through me at something far away. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, broken only by the hum of the gas station coolers. For a full 10 seconds, the world stopped moving. Officer Miller, the big man who had been so full of bluster and authority, looked like a child who had just been told that monsters were real. Finally he blinked. He cleared his throat, a dry, rasping sound. There's been a misunderstanding, he stammered, handing my phone back to me. His hand was shaking slightly. My fingers closed around the cool plastic of my phone. I didn't know what my mom had said, but it was like she'd reached through the phone and flipped a switch deep inside him. The bully was gone, replaced by a twitchy, nervous man in a uniform that suddenly looked too big for him. You said my taillight was out, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The fear was receding, replaced by a cold, simmering anger. I felt bolder now. It must have been a trick of the light, he said, avoiding my eyes. He started backing away towards his cruiser. Reflection off the canopy. You're free to go. You threw my popcorn on the seat, I stated, not as a question but as a fact. You kicked my feet apart. You said you were going to find something illegal in my car. He stopped, his hand on the door of his cruiser. He turned to face me, and for a second I saw the old malice flash in his eyes. He wasn't scared anymore. He was humiliated, and that was far more dangerous. "Look, kid," he snarled, his voice low. "I told you it was a misunderstanding. I suggest you get in your car and drive away before I change my mind." It was a hollow threat, and we both knew it. The power had shifted. He had been holding all the cards, and now he was holding a fistful of nothing. But he was still a cop. He still had a badge and a gun. My heart was still hammering, but now it was with indignation, not just fear. I stood my ground, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. That's when the headlights swept across the scene. A car turned into the gas station, moving with a quiet purpose that was completely different from Miller's aggressive crawl. It was my mom's other car, her personal one. A sleek, dark gray SUV. It pulled up directly behind Miller's cruiser, its high beams pinning him like a bug on a board. He flinched, raising a hand to shield his eyes. The engine cut off. The driver's side door opened, and my mom stepped out. She wasn't wearing scrubs or her weekend jeans. She was in a dark pantsuit, the kind she wore when she had to go into the office for something serious. Her heels clicked on the pavement with a sharp, commanding rhythm. Every line of her body was tense, radiating an icy fury that I had only seen a handful of times in my life. She looked at me first, a quick, sweeping glance that asked 1,000 questions and confirmed I was physically unharmed. Then her eyes landed on Officer Miller, and the temperature at the gas station seemed to drop by 20 degrees. "Officer Miller," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled, and utterly lethal. It was the voice that left no room for argument. "I believe you were just speaking with me on the phone." Miller was flustered. He looked from her to me, then back to her. "Ma'am, this is an active scene. I'm going to have to ask you to stay in your vehicle." My mom didn't even blink. She took 2 more steps forward, stopping right at the bumper of his cruiser. "This is no longer your scene, officer. In fact, you are now part of my scene." She reached into the pocket of her blazer and pulled out a small black leather wallet. She flipped it open. "Special Agent Alana Washington, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The words hung in the air, seeming to shimmer under the fluorescent lights. Miller stared at the gold badge and the crisp ID card next to it. He went pale. Not just a little pale, but a ghastly, sickly white. His jaw worked silently, but no sound came out. The man in the minivan, who had been watching the whole time, now had his phone out and was clearly recording. "You alleged a broken taillight that isn't broken," my mom continued, her voice like chips of ice. "You detained my son under the false pretense of a stolen vehicle report, which a simple check of the plates would have immediately dismissed. You conducted an unlawful search of his person and the vehicle. You have, in the last 10 minutes, violated his civil rights in at least 4 different ways. So I'm going to need your name, badge number, and the name of your commanding officer. Now." Miller looked like he was going to be sick. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but he was interrupted by the squeal of tires. Another county sheriff's cruiser, this one moving fast, pulled into the gas station and screeched to a halt beside the first one. Its lights weren't flashing, but it was clear it had been called for backup. 2 more officers, younger and more athletic-looking than Miller, jumped out. "Miller, you got a situation here?" the lead officer asked, his hand resting casually on the butt of his holstered pistol. His eyes darted between my mom in her power suit, me standing by my car, and his partner, who now looked like a cornered animal. A desperate, ugly look crossed Miller's face. He saw his chance. His backup was here. He could twist this. He could paint my mom as some crazy woman interfering with an arrest. He straightened up, puffing his chest out, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. "Thank God you're here," Miller said, his voice dripping with false urgency as he pointed a trembling finger at my mom. "This woman just pulled up. She's interfering with a felony stop and threatening a police officer." The 2 new officers instinctively took a step forward, their postures shifting from relaxed to tactical. The lead one, with short cropped blonde hair and a jaw that looked like it was carved from granite, placed his hand firmly on his weapon. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down," he said, his voice hard. "You need to step away from my fellow officer." My mom didn't move a muscle. She didn't even look at him. Her gaze was locked on Miller, who was now sweating visibly despite the cooling night air. "Your fellow officer," she said, her voice dripping with contempt, "is fabricating a felony stop to cover for an illegal search and harassment of a minor. He's a liar, and he's a disgrace to your badge." "That's enough!" the second officer barked, starting to move around the cruiser to flank her. That's when my mom finally turned her head, just slightly, to address the blonde officer. "My name is Special Agent Alana Washington. My credentials are in my hand. Your partner, Officer Miller, badge number 7 Mortine, is attempting to obstruct a federal agent. Furthermore, he is doing so after committing multiple civil rights violations which have been witnessed and are currently being recorded by a civilian over there. She gave a slight nod toward the man in the minivan, who quickly tried to hide his phone, failing miserably. The blonde officer's eyes flickered to the minivan, then back to the FBI badge in my mom's hand. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Cops are trained to recognize credentials. They are also trained to back their own. He was caught in the middle, and his training was at war with itself. Miller, seeing his backup hesitate, got desperate. She's lying. Her kid was driving erratically. I smelled marijuana on him. This is a righteous stop. The lie was so blatant, so absurd, that a bubble of hysterical laughter almost escaped my lips. I hadn't smoked a cigarette in my life, let alone anything else. "You didn't smell anything," I yelled, finding my voice. "You pulled in after I was already pumping gas." "Stay out of this, kid," Miller roared, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You're already in enough trouble." "Officer," my mom said, her voice cutting through the noise like a surgeon's scalpel. "What's your name?" The blonde cop hesitated. "Sergeant Brody," he said finally. "Sergeant Brody," my mom said, giving him her full attention. "You have two choices right now. You can either believe the desperate lies of a dirty cop who is trying to drag you down with him, or you can listen to me. I suggest you listen to me." She pulled out her own phone. "Who is your watch commander tonight?" Brody and his partner exchanged a nervous glance. Miller's face went slack with panic. This was not going the way he'd planned. "Ma'am, you can file a complaint down at the station in the morning," Brody began, trying to de-escalate. "This is past a complaint, Sergeant," my mom interrupted, her fingers already dialing. "This is now an official inquiry. I am giving you one last chance to provide me with your watch commander's name before I call the sheriff directly." The word sheriff hung in the air like a guillotine. Calling a watch commander was one thing. Calling the elected head of the entire department, at home, on a Tuesday night? That was a career-ending move for someone. Sergeant Brody swallowed hard. He looked at Miller, who was pleading with his eyes, and then at my mom, who looked as immovable as a mountain. He made his choice. "Lieutenant Davies," he said quietly. "Thank you, Sergeant," my mom said. She held the phone to her ear. It rang twice. "Yes, I need to speak with Lieutenant Davies. This is Special Agent Washington of the FBI. It's urgent." A tense silence fell over the gas station. Miller looked like he was about to throw up. Brody and his partner stood frozen, their hands now conspicuously far from their weapons. They were no longer backup. They were witnesses. My mom listened for a moment, then spoke again. "Lieutenant, I'm at the Shell station on Elm and Oak. I'm on the scene with your officers, Miller, badge 714, and Sergeant Brody. Officer Miller has illegally detained my juvenile son and is now making false accusations to cover his actions. I need you down here immediately." "Yes." "And Lieutenant, you might want to call the sheriff. Let him know that one of his deputies just harassed the family of a federal agent." She hung up. The finality of it was absolute. Miller stumbled back against his cruiser as if he'd been physically struck. The bravado, the arrogance, the racism, it all evaporated, leaving behind a pathetic, terrified man. He knew he was done. There was no talking his way out of this. There was no twisting the story. An FBI agent on the phone with his lieutenant, with the sheriff about to be woken up. It was over. Sergeant Brody looked at his partner, his expression grim. "Go secure the civilians' video," he ordered quietly. The younger officer nodded and walked numbly towards the minivan. Brody then turned to Miller. "Miller, give me your weapon." "What? Brody, you can't be serious," Miller spluttered. "I am deadly serious," Brody said, his voice flat and cold. "You are officially off this scene. You will not speak to anyone until the lieutenant arrives. Give me your weapon now." Reluctantly, shamefully, Miller unholstered his pistol and handed it to Brody, grip first. It was the ultimate humiliation, a visible stripping of his power in the middle of a brightly lit gas station. My mom put her phone away and came over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was firm and steadying. "Are you okay, Leo?" she asked softly, her eyes searching mine. I could only nod, my throat tight with 1,000 unsaid things. We stood there for what felt like an eternity. The only sounds were the distant traffic on the main road and the quiet crackle of Brody's radio. Miller was leaning against his car, head in his hands. Then, in the distance, we heard a siren. Not the frantic yelp of a patrol car, but the deeper, more authoritative whoop of a command vehicle. It grew louder and louder, joined by another and then another. Headlights flashed at the entrance to the gas station. It wasn't just the lieutenant. A procession of official vehicles pulled in, two more marked cruisers, and, leading them, a large, black, unmarked SUV with flashing lights in the grille. The SUV came to a stop, and the driver's door opened. A tall man in a crisp uniform with silver eagles on his collar stepped out. It was Sheriff Thompson himself, and the look on his face told me Officer Miller wasn't just losing his job, he was about to lose his entire world. Sheriff Thompson moved with the controlled urgency of a man who did not like having his evenings interrupted. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from oak. He wasn't just the boss, he was a politician, and his eyes, sharp and intelligent, were already calculating the potential damage. He strode across the pavement, his gaze sweeping over the scene. Miller slumped against his car, Sergeant Brody standing guard, the other officers looking profoundly uncomfortable, and finally, my mom and me. He walked directly to my mom, extending a hand. "Agent Washington," he said, his voice a low baritone. "Sheriff Thompson. I apologize for having to meet under these circumstances." "Sheriff," my mom replied, shaking his hand firmly, but without warmth. "Thank you for coming. I apologize for pulling you away from your home, but your officer here created a situation that required immediate attention." Thompson's gaze shifted to Officer Miller. It was a look of pure, unadulterated fury, so intense I felt it from 10 feet away. "Miller," he barked. The sound was like a gunshot. Miller flinched and straightened up, his face ashen. "My office, 0800. You bring your union rep, and until then you are on administrative leave. Sergeant Brody will escort you to the station to turn in your badge and remaining credentials. You are not to speak to anyone about this incident. Is that understood?" "Sheriff, I can explain," Miller began, his voice a desperate whine. "Was that a yes, sir? Or are you trying to dig this hole all the way to China, son?" Thompson cut him off, his voice dangerously quiet. Miller deflated. "Yes, sir," he mumbled to the pavement. Sergeant Brody gave a short, curt nod to the sheriff, and then gestured for Miller to move. "Let's go, Dave." He led Miller to the back of his own cruiser, opened the door, and gestured for him to get in. It wasn't an arrest, but it was the next closest thing, a cop being ferried from the scene of his own crime by his own colleague. The humiliation was absolute. As the cruiser pulled away, I felt a strange sense of relief, but it was hollow. The show was over, but the damage was done. Sheriff Thompson turned back to us, his expression softening slightly. "Agent Washington." "Leo," he said, acknowledging me for the first time. "On behalf of my department, I am profoundly sorry for what happened here tonight. There is no excuse for this kind of behavior. None." "I appreciate that, Sheriff," my mom said, "but apologies won't fix a systemic problem. Officer Miller felt entitled to harass my son because he's a young black man driving a nice car. He didn't see a kid on an errand for his mother. He saw a criminal. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was racism, plain and simple." The sheriff didn't flinch from the word. He nodded slowly. "I understand, and I assure you, we will be conducting a full and transparent internal affairs investigation. Miller's body cam footage will be reviewed, as will the dash cam from his vehicle. We'll take a statement from you and from Leo, at your convenience, of course. We will also be taking possession of the civilian's cell phone video as evidence." "I've already spoken to the witness," my mom said, gesturing towards the man in the minivan who was now talking to one of the other officers. "He's agreed to cooperate fully." It was amazing. In the chaos, she'd already managed to secure the key witness. "Good," Thompson said. He looked genuinely troubled. "Is there anything else I can do for you tonight? Do you need an escort home?" "No, Sheriff, we'll be fine," my mom said. "But I will be following up. I want a copy of the full IA report when it's completed, and I expect to be kept informed of every step of the disciplinary process." It wasn't a request. "You have my word, Agent," he said. He gave me a final, apologetic look before turning to coordinate with his remaining officers. The scene began to break up. The other cruisers left, and soon it was just us, the sheriff, and a lone officer taking final photos of the scene for the report. My mom put her arm around my shoulders and pulled me into a hug. I leaned into her, the adrenaline finally starting to drain out of me, leaving me shaky and exhausted. "Let's go home, baby," she whispered. We drove home in silence, me in her sedan, her following in the SUV. The crushed popcorn on the passenger seat seemed like a relic from a different lifetime. When we got back to the house, the lights were on, and the living room looked warm and inviting, but the cozy feeling of our impending movie night was gone. The world felt colder, sharper at the edges. I sat on the couch while my mom made us both a cup of tea. She came and sat next to me, handing me a steaming mug. My hands were still trembling slightly. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, Leo," she said softly. her FBI agent persona gone, replaced by just my mom. "It's not your fault," I mumbled into the mug. He was enjoying it, scaring me. She nodded, her expression pained. "I know. Men like him get their power from fear. The second they lose that power, they have nothing." We sat there for a while, the silence heavy, but comfortable. The experience had cracked something open in me, a deep well of anger and helplessness that I didn't know what to do with. "Mom," I said finally, "what did you say to him? On the phone?" She took a slow sip of her tea, her eyes distant for a moment. "I didn't say much," she said. "When you told me an officer had questions, I asked you to describe him. You said he had a big mustache and was standing behind the car. I asked if his name tag said Miller. You said yes." My brow furrowed. "How did you know his name?" A grim, tired smile touched her lips. "Because, Leo, this wasn't Officer Miller's first complaint. It wasn't even his 10th. My office has an open file on him. We're building a federal civil rights case against him, and a few other officers in that department for a pattern of harassment targeting minority residents." She looked at me, her eyes full of a fierce, protective fire. "When he got on the phone and identified himself, all I said was, 'Officer Miller, this is Special Agent Alana Washington. You are currently harassing the subject of a federal protective detail, and you just made yourself the star witness in my investigation. Stay where you are. I'm on my way.'" The words hung in the air of our quiet living room, heavier than anything that had happened at the gas station. An open federal case, a protective detail. My mom hadn't just shown up as an angry mother. She had walked into an active investigation where I had just been made the prime victim. I stared at her, trying to process the revelation. All those times she'd warned me to be careful, to always know my rights, to text her when I arrived somewhere. It wasn't just parental worry. It was professional concern. She knew there were predators in uniform patrolling our streets, and she was actively hunting them. "You've been investigating him this whole time?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "For 6 months," she confirmed, her gaze steady. "We've had dozens of complaints, all with the same pattern. Traffic stops for non-existent violations, aggressive questioning, illegal searches, all targeting Black and Latino drivers. But the cases were hard to prove. It was always the victim's word against the officers. We needed something undeniable, something on tape, with a credible witness that showed clear, malicious intent." She sighed, a deep, weary sound. "I never, ever wanted it to be you, Leo. But tonight, Miller handed us our whole case on a silver platter. The next few days were a blur of officialdom. We gave our statements to a grim-faced internal affairs detective, a man who seemed genuinely disgusted by Miller's actions. My mom sat with me the whole time, not as an FBI agent, but as my mother, interjecting only to clarify a point or to make sure I was comfortable. We then met with an assistant U.S. attorney, a sharp woman named Miss Davies, who was part of my mom's task force. She listened intently to my story, her expression hardening with every detail I recounted, from the lie about the taillight to the popcorn being scattered across the seat. The video from the man in the minivan was crystal clear, his audio capturing every sneering word Miller had said. Combined with the dash, cam, and body cam footage, it created an airtight narrative of abuse of power. The story hit the local news a week later. Deputy facing federal charges after harassing FBI agent's son. Miller's smug, mustached face was plastered everywhere. The department's official statement was swift and decisive. Officer David Miller had been fired, effective immediately, for conduct unbecoming an officer and for violating the civil rights of a citizen. Sheriff Thompson went on TV and gave a press conference, calling Miller's actions a betrayal of the badge and promising departmental reforms. It was a victory, I knew, but it didn't feel like one. I felt exposed, raw. Every time I got in the car, my eyes darted to the rearview mirror. Every police cruiser I saw made my stomach clench. The anger was still there, a hot coal in my chest, but it was mixed with a deep, lingering fear. The gas station no longer felt like a simple suburban landmark. It felt like a crime scene. A few weeks later, my mom came home from work and found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window. "Miss Davies called today," she said, setting her briefcase down. "They've offered Miller a plea deal. If he pleads guilty to the federal civil rights charge, they'll recommend a sentence of 36 months in federal prison. He avoids a longer sentence, and we avoid a drawn-out, painful trial." "Do you want me to do it?" I asked. "To testify?" She came and sat across from me, taking my hands in hers. "Leo, this is your call. What Miller did, he did to you. If you feel you need to face him in court and tell your story, I will be right there beside you, and we will see it through to the end. But if you feel that accepting this deal, knowing for certain that he will lose his career, his freedom, and his ability to ever do this to anyone again, is enough, then that is a perfectly valid choice too. There is no right or wrong answer. I thought about it for a long time. I pictured sitting on a witness stand, with Miller's lawyers trying to twist my words, trying to paint me as a liar, a troubled teen. I pictured reliving every humiliating second of that night under the harsh lights of a courtroom. Then I pictured Miller, stripped of his uniform and his authority, walking into a prison cell. The power he had tried to exert over me would be gone completely. He would be just a man, a disgraced man paying for his hate. I want him to take the deal, I said, my voice firm. I don't need to see him again. I just need to know he's gone. My mom squeezed my hands. Okay, baby, she said, her eyes shining with pride. Okay. The sentencing was 2 months later. We didn't go, but Miss Davies called my mom the moment it was over. David Miller had been sentenced to 36 months in a federal penitentiary. As a convicted felon, he could never own a firearm again. He could never be a cop again. He was finished. Furthermore, the fallout from the case had forced the sheriff's department to implement a new early warning system to flag officers with multiple complaints, and mandatory racial bias training was being implemented department-wide. Our ordeal had, in a small way, forced a real change. That night, my mom suggested we try our movie night again. I went to the store, a different one this time, and bought the overpriced popcorn. As I drove, I saw a police cruiser pull up behind me at a red light. The old knot of fear tightened in my stomach for a split second. And then, it just loosened. I took a deep breath. I hadn't done anything wrong. I was just a kid going to the store for his mom. I had a right to be on this road, in this car, in this town. David Miller had tried to take that feeling of safety from me, but he had failed. He was the one in a cage now. I was still free. When I got home, my mom had the movie queued up. I dumped the popcorn into our big yellow bowl and sat down next to her on the couch. She put her arm around me, and we settled in to watch the film. It was just a normal Tuesday night, quiet and comfortable, but this time it felt different. It wasn't just a victory for us, it was a promise that the darkness doesn't always win. Sometimes the good guys, even when they're just a 17-year-old kid and his FBI agent mom, get to win, too. And that was a story worth telling.